All right, everyone. We might leave the discussions there. Now, so there are three discussion points. What's the greatest success of the mandate? What's the greatest opportunity for improvement? And for the mandate to be useful to the profession, what has to happen next? Just before we go through and start getting responses from you, I'm just going to ask for a quick response from our two facilitators here, from Jean and from Dan, because the question's been asked out in the room, and I think we should get it out of the way, straight away. The question about, well, why have a mandate at all? What's the point of it? Jean, who wants to address that?
Sure.
Are we mic'd up? We need our two-row beauty, thanks.
Sure. I guess our experience with the Stockholm Accords has been that having a global advocacy platform that we can say was genuinely developed in a grassroots way with input from professionals and academics all over the world has been immensely useful to the Global Alliance. And it's been very helpful, I think, in our interactions with groups outside the profession. To give you an example, last night I attended the PRIA College of Fellows dinner, and we had a guest speaker, Paul Druckmann, CEO of the International Integrated Reporting Council, who's speaking, I think, right 2 sessions after this today. And he talked about the Melbourne Mandate. And so there's somebody who's an accountant by trade, who's a business leader, who's widely respected. And I think having these sorts of intellectual assets and tools, and having, more importantly, a sense of consensus within our profession about how we're defining ourselves and our areas of value, it makes it easier to make the case for what we do. And so there's a reason why we've tried to identify both in the Stockholm process and in this one, what are the characteristics of a communicative organization, first of all, and then what is the role and value of PR. The other point I'll make is we also want your help in identifying how you would see this being useful or how it might be useful. And so in the app, the second last question actually is, I've got it in front of me here, as a professional, how would you actually use it? And we've got a series of options there to plan your professional development program around these themes, a bit of a professional learning plan, share and discuss it with colleagues, share and discuss it with managers in other disciplines within the organization, use it as a guide to develop your role and your aspirations as a professional. So you'll see there are various options there, but part of the joy and the challenge here is that it really is something we're trying to co-create with you.
Okay. And moreover, the session right after this, you'll hear 5 examples of how the Stockholm Accords were implemented by organizations. And if you were in my session earlier this morning, you would have heard many slides from Maria Cristina Milano telling you how they use the themes of the Melbourne Mandate to align some activities, some communication activities within their company. So they're very concrete examples we can take away from this. Dan's outlined some of them that are questionnaire in the app. Do look at that. I know we asked you for 3 questions. There's about 6 or 7 more questions. A quick survey, it'll take you about 5 minutes to fill out, and it will help us tomorrow when we come back and ask your general endorsement. This is your chance to get your imprint on this document, because tomorrow we'll be finalizing it. In the hours to come, we're going back to work with your feedback, and we will present it back to you tomorrow. We will present it in a fashion of, you said, this is the old text, this is the new text, this is what we've done with this, and we'll seek your consensus approval of the document and publish it and promote it and disseminate it.
Okay, so 3 levels of feedback really here in the room right now, which we're just about to get into. Those index cards you were given as well, you can write your comments on that. There'll be 3 bowls outside the doors related to the 3 key areas that you can put the cards in as well, and the app. And we do urge you to have a look at that app, download it using the little code in your program, and answer the survey there. But let's get on with the feedback here now. Let's get these house lights up a little bit, and if I can get my radio mic working as well, then I can move away from the lectern. And let's start with listening. We have some roving mics in the room, so let's just quickly get a sense of our answers to the first one. What's the greatest success of the mandate? In our listening section here, anyone would like to kick off? Anyone want to start? We've got a question in the middle of the section here. Gentleman without jackets coming down on your left. And just so you know, Dan is taking notes. He's not just on Facebook here. He's writing down what you say.
Okay, Gareth Lloyd. Just want to make sure I can read my own handwriting.
Yes.
Never mind represent my colleagues. But we thought on that first point, the greatest success, because it actually represents best practice in terms of international experience. It puts listening and the role, indeed, of social media at the core of what we're doing. By listening, it gives the organisations involved the power to act, so it's not a static tool. It recognises language as a tool for action. Then on the second point, we had an observation on the wording. If I can just turn my page. Point number two, pursues policies and practices based on internationally recognised standards for corporate responsibility, sustainability. Right, sorry, I'm on number 3, sees listening as a research-based process. We're a little bit uncomfortable about that phrase there, research-based process, because we thought it might be interpreted rather narrowly. So we had another bit of wording there, is recognises that listening and engagement are critical to identifying both risks and opportunities in which all internal and external stakeholders can play a role. So listening is much more than a process.
Okay.
So we feed that out as a part of constructive
and that's on your index card, so that'll go in the bowl out there, which is great.
Yep. And then on the third point, in terms of to be useful to the profession, we felt that there were a number of things that could be done, in particular, actually build it into professional development and training programs. What does this mean? Actually use it internally in corporates, NGOs, government and so on as a benchmark for team development.
Yep.
Maybe actually put on case studies on your alliance, because it's easier for people to actually get into it.
I'll get you to wrap up because we need to get through a few people.
And finally, maybe think of awards around it.
Okay. Anyone else from listening? We're just going to stay in the listening section for the moment just to get a sense of some responses to those three key questions. Come on, guys, you're all talking about, you don't have to answer all three, but just a sense. Yes, we've got in the red jacket here, just a microphone, thank you. You don't have to respond to all three if you don't want to.
No, just to add to Gareth's comments, actually, on point 6, we just felt that the wording demonstrate continuously that the organisation is genuinely listening could have possibly just been replaced with continuously listen. We just felt it had a little bit of a ring that seemed to be doing what's right rather than actually doing what's right.
Yes, okay, great. And another comment just up the end of the row here, yes?
Perhaps a recommendation for a 7 or 8, which would be to evaluate the effectiveness or to measure the engagement as well. It seems that the reporting aspect is a bit thin, so I think...
so a bit of accountability.
Adding that, yes.
Okay, that's a good observation. Anyone else from listening? Yes, just behind you, well done.
One of the things we were talking about is not only listening, but actively providing channels for listening.
Okay.
So as an organisation, having a commitment to, providing those channels so that your stakeholders, ones you know about and ones you don't know about, can actually access you. So just something in there about the channels.
Okay. Anyone else in our listening section just want to make a note? Yes, if you just keep passing the microphone behind you.
Not to labour on semantics too much further, but the concept of it reminds me of the MEAA Code of Ethics for Journalists that operates in Australia, and the wording of that is something like journalists will report fairly and that type of thing. So where it talks about public relations and communication professionals have a mandate too, whether it's not that they're being forced to, as in it's not mandatory, it's not mandated that they're being forced to, but it's something we will do because we want to. Whatever the wording would be around that, whether it's aspire or will or...
Yeah. Good. Anybody else? Up the back. Yay! Hi! Right up the back there. There's a very enthusiastic cluster.
Thank you. My name is Noela Mutanda from Kenya, that is in Africa. And we kind of threw a spanner into the works, and we were asking, listening to who, and who is asking the question. And the main concern that we had was that rarely, or we felt, are the people we serve, do they really know exactly what they want? An example of 100 years ago, when we were still using the horses for movement, if you'd asked a consumer or a commuter what they wanted a faster horse. And we had the aeroplanes. They never thought about it. So really, do they really know what they want? Thank you.
Okay. We might, because of the time, need to move on to our next section, and let's say that's character now, so we'll get the responses to those three key questions from this area. Responsibility, because you're such responsible people, you won't mind waiting to last, I know. This is the very serious people in this side of the room. All right, so who wants to kick off? Right down the front here, if we can. Going to make you run today. So a quick run through to those three, if you can.
Hi, and this is actually very general, but it boils down to reputation, boils down to character, the DNA of the organization. If we ask the question, what is the greatest success of the mandate, what I've heard summarized the following. A recognition of communication management as an important ingredient in the management mix of any organization in the corporate environment. That means that we are not playing roles any longer, and we don't have functions necessarily that are supportive, but that we are in ourselves being recognized as a management ingredient. To me, that plays a very big role in where we have to go. Okay. What perhaps is the greatest opportunity in that particular area for improvement? What we found in South Africa was the corporate governance aspects and the Stockholm Accords a few years back, is that practice would need notes. So we would have practice notes for the implementation of these things into organizations. Otherwise, it stays with a document standing on a shelf. So implementation is extremely important. And then, of course, cultural environments. We've just now heard from Kenya. Also, I'm from South Africa. I'm sorry, that's also a country in Africa. It's a question of really looking at cultural environments which does still have influences different from the global environment, if we would like to add on that. And then for the mandate to be useful to the profession, what has to happen next? I think you have mentioned it, emphasis on responsible leadership and sustainability. We preach sustainability, but our subject and our practice should also become sustainable communication.
Okay.
And
very briefly now.
Yeah, sustainable communication.
Okay, let's leave it there, because time is against us. Staying in our character group, anyone else like to say something? Yes, this gentleman here on the aisle.
I'm going to be very short. The success of the mandate is for us to have a guide.
To have a
guide. That's it.
Okay, all right. So it actually takes some tangible form. Yeah, all right. Go ahead.
Looking at the greatest opportunity, I think we've been talking about storytelling and the importance of storytelling. I think actually having some stories that could illustrate these as an appendix. We had a lot of discussion whether this was too long. For instance, if you were talking to a CEO, could you take 4 pages in? We didn't resolve that between us. Some of us felt it should be shortened, some of us felt that it might get a little bit too basic, but certainly having an appendix of stories that could actually illustrate, bring to life, and I presume that would be done web-based, but that would certainly start to give this power and actually really bring out what we've been talking about, which is the importance of storytelling.
That's great. Also, still staying in our character section, up the back at all? Anyone? Yeah. Well done. It's like carrying the torch.
Amisa George, Texas Christian University, USA, and Swinburne University here in Melbourne, visiting associate professor. I'm just going to focus on the last question. For the mandate to be useful, what has to happen next? In our discussion here, we agreed on language. It's very important to ensure that everyone, not just communication professionals, understand the language that we use all the time in communicating. So it's very important for us to focus on language, and I do agree with the person who mentioned culture, language and culture within that context. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move now to our final group, which is responsibility, and we have a hand straight up here in the middle. Have we got a microphone nearby? Here it comes.
Question 1, the structure is fine, tick. Question 2, the greatest opportunity for improvement, we have two concerns. One relates to the notion that is described in two of the sections about societal norms. It says that we should be, in item 2 under organisational responsibility, we should be seeking to align internal and external stakeholder interests and organisational values with societal norms. You have just damned all of those of us who work with active citizenry. We simply cannot be involved in public relations in changing societal paradigms. We cannot convince the world that we ought to be involved in climate change if in fact we were to have adopted the societal norm. So we would ask you to remove that notion of societal norms, and perhaps if you want to talk about the role of an active citizenry. The second thing is that you have talked about accountability metrics, and in the section under organisational responsibility, defining accountability metrics, you have just vested upon our shoulders the responsibility for designing all of the metrics for all individual contributions across the entire organisation. And frankly, that is a responsibility that's too great to bear, and we would suggest to you that we might be defining the accountability metrics for the relationship systems or for the communications or whatever, but we need to be clear that we are confining our discussion. Our third comment is, and it supports comments already made, only the English language tends to use present participles as verbs. They weaken the strength of the verb. Most of you don't know about grammar. I'm one of the very old farts that used to actually both learn it and teach it. And you would never have worked for me if you'd used a present participle to open a clause, but that's okay.
Oh, it's like having my sub-editor back nagging at me again. Yeah, I hear you, all right. Anything else?
We need to create, support, ensure, define, provide, seek, influence, reinforce and define. If we're going to make this statement, let's be strong about it.
All right.
And our final comment is, for the mandate to be useful, we think it would be very helpful if there was a process now by which we developed a common set of metrics. So we're talking about these accountability metrics, but we really have no idea what they might be. So we're arguing that as a next step, we should think about what are the accountability metrics. Thank you.
That's great, thank you. Now that we have had listened to you, anyone else from our responsibility section? Or is that just about summed it up? Look, it's sounding terrific, and clearly, I mean, everyone's got index cards. I can see them waving them around and also continuing to jot on them. So remember, that's all part of the response, which I promise you is going to be read word for word overnight, and a lot of people are going to be involved in recrafting the wording of that mandate according to what they see. And also, if I can just reiterate Jean's point about use that app, use the app, go to it, run through that survey. It'll only take you a couple of minutes, submit it, and that'll be taken into account as well. Gentlemen, you want to make a couple of quick responses just to wrap up what you've heard?
No, just want to thank everybody, everybody for taking the time to review the mandate, to think about it, to talk about it in small groups, and thanks to the brave souls who actually stood up and gave us some input at the microphones. We appreciate everything from the big substantive changes to the grammatical ones, you know, because both are important since we're talking about communication. So we think we've taken fairly good notes. You also have little cards, so please drop them off on the way out, or if there's any doubt as to where to put them, you can bring them right up here if that's easier for you as well. Thank you again, and we'll be reporting back at the end of the conference tomorrow in our closing session, sharing with you some of the revisions that have come out of this session.
And thank you one more time, and please take 5 minutes to complete the survey in the app. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.